Have you ever felt that chill down your spine, that paralyzing certainty that the place you ran to for help is, in fact, the most dangerous place of all? Imagine having the absolute conviction that you just survived an assassination attempt, but when you look into the eyes of the authority that should protect you, you find no support, only a complicit and icy silence. It is about this feeling of absolute isolation that we will talk about today, a story where justice is not blind. It chooses, very carefully, who to look at and, above all, who to ignore. The night wasn't just dark, it was hostile. The rain lashed against Maya's windshield with a violence that felt personal, as if the storm itself were trying to warn her to turn around, to leave that city while there was still time. But Maya ignored her instincts. With trembling but firm hands, she gripped the steering wheel of her dented sedan, the metal still creaking from the heat of the friction, the smell of burnt rubber permeating her clothes and hair. Minutes earlier, on that deserted back road, it hadn't been carelessness, it hadn't been the wet road, and it hadn't been bad luck. It had been a pair of high beams blinding her rearview mirror and a steel bumper deliberately pushing her into the ditch. She knew what she had seen. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, transforming the initial fear into a cold, calculating fury. Maya wasn't prone to hysterics. As a doctor, she dealt with facts, with diagnoses, with tangible reality. And the reality was that someone had tried to take her off the road. Upon seeing the police station building, with its yellow lights and the wet flag hanging from the flagpole, she felt that instinctive relief we all feel upon seeing a symbol of order. Perhaps you understand what that is. That comforting naivete of believing that, crossing those doors, the nightmare ends. But sometimes, that's exactly where the real terror begins. As she pushed open the heavy glass door, the sound of the storm was muffled by the constant hum of fluorescent lights and the crackling of the police radio in the background. The air smelled of stale coffee and damp paperwork. The officer at the reception desk, a middle-aged man with the weary look of someone who had seen it all in that small town, didn't even raise his head immediately. Maya walked to the counter, the sound of her wet shoes echoing like an intruder in that masculine sanctuary. She didn't ask for water. She didn't ask to sit down. She placed her hands on the counter and, her voice choked with tension but clear as crystal, reported the crime. A black pickup truck, double cab, license plate KLM Q22. She repeated the alphanumeric sequence as if it were a prayer for protection, the only proof she had that she wasn't crazy. And it was at that exact moment that the atmosphere in the room changed. There was no rush, no emergency calls, no worry. There was only a sudden freeze. The officer stopped writing. The radio seemed to get quieter. The policeman exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance with another colleague who was near the coffee machine. That look carried a weight, a shared secret that Maya, the outsider, the strange one from the big city, wasn't allowed to understand. Stay here with me, because this is the turning point that transforms a bad day into a deadly trap. Have you ever found yourself speaking the truth, screaming inside, while realizing that the person in front of you has already decided that you are the problem? The officer cleared his throat, uncomfortable, and dropped his pen on the table. Are you sure about that license plate, doctor? Visibility is terrible out there. The shadows play tricks on us. The sentence wasn't a question. It was a suggestion. A veiled order for her to rethink, for her to forget. Maya felt her stomach churn. The license plate didn't belong to just any stranger. The tension in the officer's shoulders, the way they avoided looking directly at her, made it clear that the vehicle belonged to someone who couldn't be touched. Someone shielded by the very system that should have handcuffed them. The realization hit her like a bucket of ice water. She wasn't safe there. She had just entered the wolf's den to denounce the wolf's cub. Indignation rose in her throat, hot and bitter. I didn't see shadows, officer. I saw who tried to kill me. Are you going to register the incident, or do I need to call the state police right now? The mention of the state police made the air even thicker. The reception officer stood slowly, his posture bordering on intimidation. But before he could respond, a door opened at the end of the corridor. Heavy, rhythmic footsteps, from boots that knew every inch of that floor, echoed through the lobby. The silence that settled wasn't one of fear, but of tense reverence. Everyone knew who was arriving, and Maya, her heart pounding in her throat, turned to face the only figure who could validate her story or seal her fate on that rainy night. The highest authority figure in that city, the man whose surname was intertwined with the roots of that place, stopped under the doorframe, adjusting the badge that gleamed under the artificial light. What she saw in his eyes wasn't welcome, but something far more complex and disturbing. Dante didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence filled the room in a way that sucked the oxygen from the surroundings, imposing a respect bordering on fear. He walked to the counter with the calm of a predator who is in no hurry because he knows his prey has nowhere to run, analyzing her from head to toe with desire, but with a clinical sweep, searching for flaws, searching for lies. Then, his gaze fell heavily on the officer, who still held the pen suspended in midair. "Any problem here, Congressman?" Dante's voice was deep and drawn out, with that local accent that seemed to carry the weight of the wet earth outside. The officer swallowed hard, forcing a nervous smile. "Nothing, Sheriff." The doctor here was confused. "The heavy rain, you know how it is." She thought she saw a vehicle push her, but it was probably just hydroplaning. "I was about to go home to rest." Maya felt her blood boil. The disqualification was subtle, but brutal. They were rewriting her story before her eyes, transforming an attempted murder into female hysteria and exhaustion. It's a suffocating feeling, isn't it? When you know the truth, but the authorities distort reality until you doubt your own sanity. Here in Heart of Protection Stories, we know these are the toughest battles, the ones where the only defense left is your own courage. If you've ever had to stand firm when everything told you to give up, leave a like here, because this story is for you. "I'm not confused, Sheriff," Maya interrupted, holding Dante's gaze, though her legs trembled beneath the wet fabric of her trousers. "And I'm not going home until someone writes down the license plate I saw. KLMQ22. Silence returned, but now it had a different texture. Dante glanced at the open incident book on the counter. The page was blank. Not a single line. He knew that license plate. He knew the owner of that car as well as he knew the scars on his own hands. It was blood of his blood. For a second, Maya saw a muscle clench in his jaw, an almost imperceptible sign of internal conflict. He knew the congressman wasn't just being lazy. He was protecting his boss's family. But there was something about Maya's demeanor that bothered Dante. She wasn't crying to gain sympathy. She was gripping a lighter so tightly that her knuckles were white, struggling to control the trembling of her hands. He'd interrogated liars his whole life. Liars look away. Liars exaggerate details. She was concise, direct, and terrified. His police instinct, the one he tried to bury beneath family loyalty, began to kick in. "Where is your car?" Dante asked, without looking at her, closing the incident book with a dry thud that sounded like a verdict. "Outside, near the entrance," she replied, her voice faltering slightly for the first time. Dante nodded for her to follow him and pushed open the police station door, stepping back out into the storm. Maya hesitated for a second. Leaving with him, into the darkness, seemed like a mistake. But staying inside, with the mocking stares of the other officers, was impossible. She followed him. The rain fell relentlessly, soaking them in seconds. Dante stopped beside Maya's sedan. He didn't need much time. His flashlight illuminated the passenger side, revealing the twisted metal and scraped black paint from another vehicle embedded in the crumpled door. It wasn't a skid. It was a side impact, calculated to throw the car into the ditch. He ran his fingers over the cold metal, feeling the violence of the blow. The physical evidence was there, screaming the truth he didn't want to hear. Someone had tried to kill that woman, and that someone was driving the car that was in his brother's garage. Dante felt a bitter taste in his mouth, the taste of a betrayal he still couldn't fully process. He turned off the flashlight and turned to Maya, who was waiting for him, hugging herself, water running down her hair, plastered to her face. At that moment, in the rain, the distance between them diminished. He was a large, intimidating man, the very image of the law that seemed to have failed him. But when he spoke, his voice came out lower, almost confidential, drowned out by the sound of thunder. "You can't stay here," he said, and for the first time, the threat in his voice wasn't directed at her, but at what was around her. "If what you're saying is true, this police station is the last place you should be right now." Maya took a step back, mistaking the warning for an expulsion. But Dante moved forward, invading her personal space, blocking the wind and rain with his broad body. He didn't touch her, but the proximity radiated a sudden and dangerous heat. "Get in the car," he ordered, not like a police officer arresting a suspect, but like someone who had just realized that trenches had been dug. "I'll take you home, and pray that no one saw us leave." Maya hesitated. Her survival instinct screamed at her to run, to flee in any direction other than the passenger seat of that man who exuded danger and authority in equal measure. But where could she run? The road was a dark, pitiful drain. The rain fell like molten lead, and the police station, that exposed brick building that should have been her sanctuary, had become a theater of lies. Dante kept the car door open, his body acting as a shield against the wind, but also as a barrier preventing any other choice. He wasn't asking. He was offering the only possible escape route from a scenario he himself seemed to fear. With clenched teeth and wounded pride, Maya got in. The smell of old leather, cold, tobacco, and disinfectant invaded her lungs. A sterile and masculine mixture that, ironically, seemed safer than the open air. From that moment on, everything begins to change silently. When the door closed, isolating them from the deafening noise of the storm, the silence that settled between them was heavy, almost solid. Dante walked around, got into the driver's side, and turned the key. The engine roared. The windshield wipers began their hypnotic dance, but he didn't accelerate immediately. His large hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that the leather creaked. He looked in the rearview mirror, not at the road, but at the entrance to the police station, where the silhouette of the receptionist watched through the wet glass, phone to his ear. That image confirmed what Maya already felt. The conspiracy wasn't a theory, it was a fact, and she was alone in the middle of it. Indignation began to replace fear in Maya's chest. It was a cold, calculating flame, born from the clarity of someone who realizes they've been discarded. She looked at Dante's profile, illuminated only by the greenish lights of the panel. He was handsome in a raw way, with harsh lines and an impenetrable expression, but that didn't matter now. What mattered was the injustice he represented. "You know who it is," she said, and it wasn't a question. Her voice cut through the silence of the cabin, sharp as glass. "You saw their hesitation. You saw how the recording disappeared. You know exactly who drives that black pickup truck." Dante didn't answer immediately. He engaged the gear and sped off, the tires screeching on the wet asphalt as he made the U-turn. He drove with aggressive skill, his eyes sweeping the road ahead and the side mirrors flashing with alarming frequency. He was hunting shadows, waiting for an attack. "Knowing and proving are two different things in this city, Doctor," he finally replied, his voice hoarse, without taking his eyes off. "The road. And accusing the wrong person without proof is the quickest way to have a fatal accident on these curves." "The wrong person." Maya let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Or the right person with the right last name. I'm not an idiot, Sheriff. I saw how they looked at you. They're not afraid of me. They're afraid you'll find out. Or worse, they think you already know and are covering it up." The accusation hung in the air. Toxic. Dante felt the blow. She was right, and that hurt the most. He knew the car belonged to his own family's inner circle, perhaps even to his younger brother, Lucas. who always had the volatile temper and sense of impunity that his surname gave him. Dante's journey had always been about maintaining order, protecting the city. But now, order demanded silence, and protection demanded war. He glanced sideways at Maya. She was huddled together, shivering with cold, but her chin was held high. There was a strength in her, a refusal to be a victim, that stirred something deep within him. He was used to people who begged or negotiated. She was demanding dignity. "I'm not covering anything up," he lied, but the lie tasted like ashes. He was, in fact, by taking her away instead of confronting his men and demanding the car owner's arrest, he was buying time. But time for whom? For her to survive, or for him to figure out how to save his brother? As the patrol car cut through the darkness, toward the secluded house Maya had rented on the outskirts of town, detail caught Dante's attention. In the rearview mirror, 2 yellow headlights appeared around the bend, maintaining a constant distance. They weren't closing in to overtake, nor were they backing away. They were hunting. Dante's heart skipped a beat. They hadn't waited. The family didn't trust him to handle the problem. They sent in the guard dogs to ensure the witness was silenced, with or without the sheriff present. Maya noticed the change in his posture. The tension in the car tripled. "What was that?" she asked, turning to look back. "Don't look," he ordered, his voice now stripped of any formality, raw and urgent. "Just hold on tight." That was the final confirmation for Maya. The defensive coldness she had built up began to crack, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. She wasn't being led to safety. She was being led to slaughter, and the man beside her was the only obstacle between her and the end. The irony was bitter. She had to trust the monster's brother to avoid being devoured. Dante accelerated, the car responding with a roar. He knew those roads better than anyone. Every pothole, every shortcut. He needed to get to her house before them. Not to drop her off and leave, but because the house was the only defensible place within a 10-kilometer radius. The hidden truth about that night was about to be violently revealed. The law no longer existed. Only the 2 of them existed, inside that metal can, against an entire city that had decided Maya was a problem to be eliminated. When the tires crunched the gravel at the entrance to Maya's house, Dante didn't wait for the car to stop completely. He suddenly turned off the headlights, plunging them into total darkness, guided only by memory and the faint moonlight filtering through the clouds. "Listen, and listen carefully." Dante turned to her, holding her arm. The touch was firm, warm, shocking against her cold skin. "When I say run, you run to the door. Don't look back. Don't stop if I fall. Understand?" Maya looked into his eyes. In that darkness, she saw something that wasn't there at the police station. She saw fear. Not fear of her, but fear. She saw a decision made. He was choosing a side, and the impact of that choice hit Maya with the force of a train. That man was about to betray everything he knew to keep a silent promise of protection. "Are they here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "They never left," he replied, releasing her arm and drawing his gun from its holster. The click of the metal sounded absurdly loud in the silence of the car. "Let's go." The race to the front door was a blur of rain and panic. Dante moved with lethal efficiency, shielding her body with his eyes scanning the line of trees. When they entered the house and Dante locked the door, leaning his back against the wood and releasing the breath he seemed to have been holding for hours, Maya realized that the world outside had ceased to exist. Reality now was that room, there, panting breaths, and the certainty that the night would be long. But, looking at him, soaked, gun in hand and gaze fixed on the window, she felt, for the first time, that perhaps she wasn't as alone as she thought. The pain of injustice still burned, but now, there was something else mixed with it. The dangerous hope of someone who had found an ally in the midst of hell. Write in the comments, "I understand that pain." The sound of the lock turning on the front door was the only noise that drowned out the thunder that shook the house. Dante didn't relax his shoulders. On the contrary, his posture became even more rigid. like an animal that knows it has cornered itself to protect its offspring. The darkness in the room was almost absolute, broken only by the intermittent flashes of lightning that outlined his silhouette against the window. An armed giant. Motionless, watching the chaos outside, Maya felt the cold of her wet clothes penetrate her bones. But the cold that came from within was worse. It was the ice of uncertainty. She was locked in the middle of nowhere, with a man who, until 10 minutes ago, represented the same force that had tried to kill her. "Move away from the window," Dante ordered, without looking at her. His voice was low, hoarse, devoid of the polished authority of an officer. It was the voice of a man calculating escape routes and firing angles. Maya recoiled until her back hit the bookshelf. Her breath was short, the air scratching her throat. She needed to understand. The medical logic in her mind demanded a diagnosis for this absurd situation. "Why did you bring me here, Dante? If you're the sheriff, why are we hiding like criminals? Why didn't you call for backup?" He turned slowly. A flash of lightning illuminated his face, and Maya saw the devastation in the man's eyes. It wasn't physical fear. It was the pain of a moral foundation being forcibly ripped away. He walked toward her, stopping at a distance that was both respectful and invasive. He needed her to understand the weight of that night. "Because there are no reinforcements, Maya." He blurted out the phrase as if spitting venom. "When I went in to get the car keys, I went to the officer on duty's desk. I was going to get the report you signed. I was going to keep the evidence for myself." He paused, wiping away the rain and frustration from his wet face. The revelation that followed was the key to everything, the breaking point that turned the town's sheriff into a target. What seemed simple begins to reveal layers that no one expected. "The incident book was there," Dante continued, his voice faltering for a split second. "But page 42, the page where you filed the complaint, it wasn't just torn, it was replaced. A new, blank sheet, with today's date, no name, no license plate, nothing. In less than 5 minutes, they erased you from the city's official history. If I'd left you there, you wouldn't have walked out the front door. You would have disappeared. And there wouldn't have been a single scrap of paper to prove you were at the police station tonight." Maya felt the impact of those words like a punch to the gut. The evil bureaucracy, the silent efficiency with which Dante's police family operated behind the scenes. It wasn't just an attempted murder on the road. It was an institutional conspiracy to ensure the crime never happened. The hidden truth was far uglier than the physical violence. It was the betrayal of those he swore to protect. Dante, seeing the blank page, understood that his men weren't just lazy or negligent. They were active accomplices. And by getting Maya out of there, he didn't just save a life. He declared war on his own brothers in arms. "They know I saw them," Dante whispered, looking again at the window where the rain lashed against the glass. "They saw my face when I picked up the book. They know I chose you. The choice." That word hung between them, heavy and electric. Dante didn't just choose the law. He chose the strange, the foreign, at the expense of blood and the blind loyalty that held that city together. Maya looked at his hands, large calloused hands, that now held a gun with the familiarity of someone expecting the worst. She saw the transformation happening before her eyes. The man before her was no longer Sheriff Dante, the pillar of the community. He was just Dante, a cornered man who had decided that his soul was worth more than his badge. "And what about the car that was following us?" Maya asked, her voice trembling but controlled. She needed to focus on survival. He turned off the headlights at the entrance to the dirt road. He replied, the tension in his shoulders increasing. "They haven't left. They're waiting for the right moment. They're waiting to be sure we're alone. They don't want witnesses. And now, I'm a witness too." The silence of the house was broken by the distant, yet unmistakable, sound of an engine being switched off and car doors slamming shut, not in front of the house, but in the back, near the woods. They were surrounding the perimeter. That night's journey had just entered its most critical phase. There was no turning back, no negotiating. Dante moved quickly. He grabbed Maya's wrist, not with brute force, but with a protective urgency, pulling her away from the window and toward the central hallway of the house, where the walls offered more cover. "Listen," he said, pressing his forehead against hers for a brief moment, a gesture of intimacy forced by danger, a transfer of courage. "I won't let them in. But if they do, you need to know that I'm not the sheriff here anymore. I'll do whatever it takes. Whatever happens in the next few hours, know that I believe you." I saw the truth in that blank piece of paper. His proximity, the smell of rain and gunpowder, his warm breath mingling with the cold air of the house. All of this created an emotional vortex. Maya, who had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to solve everything on her own, realized that this was a battle she couldn't win alone. She looked into Dante's dark eyes and saw his final decision. He would die in that room before letting anyone touch her. The male protection there wasn't an abstract or sexist concept. It was a physical, real, and bloody barrier against injustice. A sound of shattering glass in the back of the house made them both freeze. The time for words was over. The decisions had been made. The sides chosen. Now, only the brutal consequence of the truth remained. Dante released her wrist, gripped the gun with both hands, and positioned himself between Maya and the darkness of the hallway. The hunt had begun, and the only law that mattered now was that of survival. The shattering of the back window wasn't followed by screams or heavy footsteps, and it was precisely this calculated silence that made Dante's blood run cold. If they were common thieves or hooligans, there would be noise, there would be chaos. But the silence indicated discipline. It indicated that whoever was breaking into that house knew exactly how to hunt without being noticed. Dante gently but firmly pushed Maya into the narrow space between the wooden wall and a heavy bookcase in the hallway, creating a visual barricade. He pressed his finger to his lips, asking for absolute silence, and while his eyes adjusted to the dim light again, he watched her. "Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject." In that split second, as danger lurked outside, Dante's mind traveled back to the moment at the police station, just half an hour earlier. There, crouched in the dark beside her, he finally admitted to himself the brutal battle he had waged in silence while listening to her recount the accident. He didn't want to have believed her. When Maya walked through those doors, wet and furious, Dante's first reaction wasn't protection, but denial. He looked at her and wished, with all his might, that she were just a confused outsider, a big city woman frightened by the shadows of our rural roads. He tried to find flaws in her story, searched for an exaggeration, a contradiction, anything that would allow him to dismiss her and return to the ignorant safety of his routine. He wanted to believe that his brother's car was in the garage, that his men were loyal, that the city he swore to protect wasn't rotting from the inside out. Denial is a powerful shield, and Dante held on to it tightly. He saw the looks on his subordinates' faces and tried to justify it. "They're just tired." He looked at the logbook and for a brief moment wanted to convince himself it was an administrative error. But there was a detail, a hidden truth he couldn't ignore, and it dismantled his entire mental defense. That's when he saw her hands. At the police station, while Maya tried to maintain a rigid posture of indignation, Dante focused on her hands resting on the counter. They weren't trembling in a performative way. It was a subtle, involuntary vibration, the kind of tremor that happens when the nervous system receives a lethal adrenaline rush and realizes it almost died. He's a born detective. He spent his life interrogating liars. Liars control their bodies, rehearse gestures, hold their gaze in an overly defiant way. But trauma doesn't know how to act. That tremor in Maya's hands was the visceral proof that screamed louder than any family loyalty. There, in the dark hallway, Dante realized that his journey of transformation hadn't begun when he drew his weapon, but in that instant of clinical observation, the police instinct, the one he had tried to suppress to protect his own, roared within him. He knew, against his own will, that she was telling the truth. And this revelation brought with it an overwhelming weight. If she was right, then everyone he knew and trusted was wrong. If she was the victim, then the monster he was hunting had the same last name as him. Dante looked at Maya huddled in the shadows. Her breathing was controlled, but he could feel the fear radiating from her like heat. He leaned down, bringing his face close to hers, whispering so softly that the words were just a breath against her skin. "I tried not to believe you, Maya," he confessed, his voice heavy with harsh guilt. "When you went in there, I looked for any reason to call you crazy. I wanted you to be wrong. Because if you were right, it meant that everything I've built here was a lie." Maya looked up, surprised by the brutal honesty at such an inappropriate moment. The impact of those words created a new kind of tension between them. It was no longer just the fear of death. It was the intimacy of two strangers sharing their demons. Dante wasn't there merely as the heroic sheriff. He was there as a man whose illusions had been shattered and who was bleeding inside. "But I saw his hands," he continued, his eyes fixed on the back door, where the shadow of a man was beginning to appear against the dim light of the storm. Liars can control their voices, but they can never control the trembling of someone who has seen death up close. I knew it then, and that's why my men lied to me. They knew I would see it. They knew that, between blood and justice, my instinct wouldn't let me choose blood. That confession changed everything. For Maya, it wasn't just about being physically saved anymore. It was about being seen. In a city that tried to erase her, that man, who had every reason to turn his back on her, saw her pain and validated it. His protection wasn't a civic duty, it was a personal redemption. He was protecting her, to save what little honor he had left. A creak on the kitchen floor, slow footsteps on the broken glass, interrupted the moment. They were inside, the family had crossed the threshold. Dante gripped Maya's arm tightly, not to hurt her, but to anchor her. Denial had completely died. What remained now was only the primal, lethal instinct of a man who had discovered that the enemy sleeps in the bed next door. He unlocked the gun, the metallic sound echoing like thunder in the silent house. The events of that night were about to be stained with violence, and Dante knew that, by pulling the trigger against the intruders, he would be shooting at his own past. "Write this down, this really affected me." The sound of footsteps on the shattered glass in the kitchen wasn't just the noise of intrusion. It was the sound of trust, irrevocably breaking. Dante knew that rhythm, heavy, dragging, confident. It wasn't some random mercenary hired from out of town. That floor belonged to someone who wore stat-tissued boots, someone who, most likely, had had coffee in the same room as him that morning. Maya, pressed against the bookshelf, watched the color drain from Dante's face. It wasn't fear, but a painful resignation, the acceptance that the transformation of that night would be complete and irreversible. He knew who was in the hallway, and knowing made it all the worse. This is where the story begins to show what's really at stake. It was no longer just about the physical safety of a witness. We were facing a complete breakdown of a code of honor. Dante made a sharp gesture with his left hand, ordering Maya to remain in the deep shadow of the bookcase. He, in turn, did not back down. He advanced. He moved into the dim light coming from the hallway, deliberately exposing himself. It was a suicidal decision for any tactician, but necessary for the man he was. He needed to look betrayal in the eye. "The house is occupied, Mendez," Dante's voice thundered in the narrow hallway, deep and authoritative, attempting, for one last second, to invoke the hierarchy that once existed between them. The figure in the kitchen stopped. The silhouette of a uniformed man, but without identification, stood out against the light of the rays. There was a pause, a silence heavy with static tension, where the world seemed to hold its breath. "You shouldn't be here, Chief." The reply came cold, familiar, devoid of surprise. Mendez, one of the most senior deputies, someone Dante had invited to barbecues in his backyard. "We saw you leaving." The order was clear. "Clean up the mess before the state delegation arrives." "She's not a mess, Mendez. She's a citizen." "And you took an oath." Dante kept his gun lowered, but his finger tightened on the trigger. He was giving the other man a chance. A single chance, to back down. The oath changes when family is at risk. "Dante, you know that better than anyone. Get out of the way, or you'll fall with her." The truth hidden behind the scenes of that small town was exposed there, raw and bloody. The family wasn't the community. It was the gang. And Dante, by choosing the law, became public enemy number one. The impact of those words hit Maya in the dark. She realized that her life was worth less than an inconvenient secret, and that the man in front of her was the only barrier between her and summary execution. Mendez raised his weapon. There was no moral hesitation on his part, only the brutal efficiency of someone following orders. Dante saw the movement of the shoulder, that slight twitch that precedes the shot, and his journey as sheriff ended in that millisecond. He didn't shoot to kill. The instinct to protect life, even that of a traitor, still pulsed within him. Dante fired at the intruder's leg, simultaneously lunging to the side, knocking over a side table to create cover. The roar of the two simultaneous shots was deafening in the confined space. Maya screamed, covering her ears with her hands, feeling the acrid smell of gunpowder burning her nostrils. Mendez howled in pain, collapsing in the kitchen, the sound of shattering ceramics accompanying his fall. But he wasn't out of the fight. He crawled, cursing, dragging himself toward the back door, realizing the silent ambush had turned into an open shootout that would attract unwanted attention. The car engine outside roared. The getaway driver wouldn't wait for a wounded man. Mendez, cowardly and bleeding, abandoned his position and disappeared into the storm. Silence returned, but now it was a buzzing, painful silence. "Dante," Maya called, her voice trembling, emerging from her hiding place. He was sitting on the floor, his back against the hallway wall, the gun still pointed toward the empty kitchen. But his left hand was pressing against the right side of his abdomen, and the dark blood was beginning to stain his beige uniform shirt, spreading too quickly. Mendez's shot hadn't missed. Maya rushed toward him, her knees hitting the hard wooden floor. The fear she had felt before, the fear of being the victim, had evaporated. Now, medical instinct took over. She pushed his hands away with professional firmness, ignoring the trembling in her own fingers. "Let me see," she ordered, tearing the fabric of his shirt. It was a graze. Dante tried to speak, but a grimace of pain cut off his sentence. Cold sweat already covered his forehead. He looked at her, and in that look, the revelations of the night solidified. "He was going to shoot you, Maya. He wasn't aiming at me. I stepped into the line of fire." The phrase hung in the air, heavy. He wasn't hit by bad luck. He was hit because he put himself in the path of the bullet meant for her. The price he paid that night wasn't just the loss of his career or the betrayal of his friends. It was torn flesh. Maya felt a lump in her throat as she pressed hard on the wound to staunch the bleeding. She was touching the man who had just sacrificed everything for her. The intimacy of that moment was overwhelming. Her hands were stained with his blood, spilled for a moral choice that no one else in that city had the courage to make. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, her eyes welling up with tears, as she tore the hem of her own shirt to make a makeshift bandage. Dante gripped her wrist, halting her frantic movement for a second. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes were focused, intense, locked on hers. "Because nobody believed you," he said, his voice weak, but filled with unwavering certainty. "And I couldn't be one of them anymore. Tonight, Maya, you're not the outsider. You're the only real thing left in this cursed city." There, on the floor of that dark hallway, while the storm raged outside and distant sirens, perhaps friendly, perhaps phobie, began to howl down the road, the bond between them solidified. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was an alliance forged in lead and survival. Maya understood that the fight wasn't over. Mendez would return. the family would return. But now, she owed her life to this man. And as she looked at the silver badge on his chest, stained red, she knew she would do anything to ensure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Their journey was only beginning, and the road ahead would be paved with danger and impossible decisions. Dante's warm, blood-stained Maya's hands, a physical and terrifying proof of the sacrifice he had just made. As she pressed the makeshift towel against his abdomen, trying to staunch the bleeding, the sound of the storm outside seemed to drown out the world, creating a bubble of isolation where only the two of them and his ragged breathing existed. Dante was pale, pain etched into his brow, but his eyes remained alert, fixed on the door through which the traitor Mendez had escaped. The adrenaline from the shootout was beginning to subside, giving way to a cold, painful clarity. They were alive, but the clock was ticking against them. The sirens in the distance were no promise of rescue. In that city, they could very well be the firing squad arriving to finish the job. From that moment on, everything begins to change silently. A static hiss broke the tense silence of the room. It wasn't coming from the official police radio strapped to Dante's belt, the one connected to headquarters, which he had switched off. The sound came from a second, smaller communicator, a private frequency radio he carried in the inside pocket of his vest, used only for tactical operations or to talk to his family. Dante tried to move to reach the device, but the pain made him clench his teeth. Maya, noticing the urgency in his eyes, fumbled in his pocket and pulled out the radio. The small device vibrated in her hand, a direct line to hell. "Answer it," Dante whispered, sweat trickling down his face. "Just press the button. They need to know I'm still breathing." Maya obeyed, holding the device close to his face. The hissing ceased, and a male voice emerged from the speaker. It wasn't the voice of an officer, nor of a stranger. It was a young voice, arrogantly calm, that Maya vaguely recognized from city parties or local newspaper headlines. It was Lucas, Dante's younger brother, the untouchable. "You've always been stubborn." Dante Lucas's voice filled the dark room, laden with a disappointment. That sounded almost affectionate, making everything more macabre. "Mendez told me you shot him. You shot one of ours because of a stranger." Dante closed his eyes for a second, absorbing the impact of that confirmation. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was blood. His own brother had ordered the attack. The hidden truth, which he feared more than death, was there, exposed on the radio frequency. "She's a witness, Lucas," Dante replied, his voice hoarse, forcing the words through the pain. "She saw the accident. You tried to kill a woman just because you were driving drunk again. Is that it?" The laugh that came from the other end of the line was short and dry. "Accident? You really think I'd order the whole city cleaned up because of a dented bumper? Get out of here, Dante. Leave the girl alone. This isn't your problem. It's settling scores." She didn't just see a car on the road. She saw what was in the back seat when we stopped at the hospital last week. She saw the boxers. Dante. The detour. Maya's gaze met Dante's, and in that instant, the missing piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The memory struck Maya like a lightning bolt. It wasn't about the road tonight. It was about last week's shift. She remembered seeing Lucas and other men unloading boxes in the back of the municipal hospital where she had recently worked. She found it strange, but didn't confront them at the time. They were controlled substances, diverted opioids, a fortune in legal drugs being trafficked under the nose of the law. They didn't try to kill her because she was an inconvenient driver. They wanted to kill her because she was the only loose end in a multi-million-dollar scheme that was rotting the entire city. "You're using the hospital," Dante murmured, the understanding transforming the physical pain into an icy fury. His journey as protector of that city had been a sham. While he arrested chicken thieves, his own brother turned public health into a cartel. "I'm building an empire, and you're in the way," Lucas retorted, his voice losing its feigned calm. "I love you, brother, but I won't let you destroy it. Get out of the house now. My men are 2 minutes away. If you're at the door when they come in, you die with her. That's my last offer." The transmission was cut off. Silence returned, but now it weighed a ton. Dante looked at the radio in Maya's hand, and then at her face. The behind-the-scenes revelation had changed the dynamic between them. Forever, Maya was no longer a random victim. She was the central target of a criminal conspiracy led by the very family of the man who had been protecting her. She saw the shame burning in Dante's eyes, the shame of an honorable man who discovers his name has been used to cover up darkness. "They're not coming to arrest anyone," Dante said, making a superhuman effort to sit up, ignoring the blood that began to flow again with the movement. "They're coming to burn the house down. They need to. Erase everything. You, me, and what you know." Maya held his shoulders, preventing him from standing up abruptly. "You can't walk, Dante. The bleeding hasn't stopped." "Then help me up," he pleaded, gripping her arm desperately. "Because if we stay here, we'll die." Lucas wasn't bluffing. "That siren you're hearing, it's not the cavalry. It's the cleanup crew." The transformation was immediate. Maya's paralyzing fear gave way to a cold determination. She understood that there was no law out there anymore. The only possible justice was inside, wounded and bleeding. She put Dante's arm around her shoulders, supporting the weight of that enormous man. The physical contact was total, bodies pressed together by necessity and danger. She felt his heart beat against her ribs, a rhythm of war. "Where are we going?" she asked, adjusting her body to serve as a crutch for him. "To the only place where my brother's radio signal doesn't reach," Dante replied, limping toward the back door, his weapon firmly in his right hand while his left rested on it. "Let's go to the old watchtower in the mountains. If we're going down, Maya, we're going down fighting. And we're going to make enough noise for the whole state to hear." They stepped out into the rain again, leaving behind the illusory safety of the house. The night was an abyss, and the decisions made in that hallway sealed their fate. There was no turning back. The sheriff and the witness against the town's heir. The impact of the hidden truth bound them together in a way no quiet romance ever could. They were accomplices now, united not by love, but by the truth that could kill them. The rain seemed to have its own weight, pounding against the car roof like stones, isolating Dante and Maya in a capsule of steel and fogged glass. They had managed to reach the vehicle, hidden on the edge of the woods. But the engine was still cold and silent, and the key hung in the ignition, untouched. Dante was hunched over the steering wheel, his breath hoarse and wheezing, each breath a battle against the excruciating pain in his side. The blood, though temporarily staunched by Maya's makeshift bandage, already stained the seatbelt, a viscous visual reminder that time was running out. But it wasn't the physical pain that paralyzed him at that crucial moment. It was the crushing weight of what he was about to do. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. In that moment of stillness, with sirens howling in the distance, like hungry wolves, Dante stared into the abyss of his own morality. Lucas's offer, transmitted through the NOS silent radio on the dashboard, echoed in his mind with seductive clarity. Get out of there. Leave the girl. It was an easy way out. A cowardly way out, yes, but a way out nonetheless. If he opened the passenger door now, if he pushed Maya out and sped toward the main road, Lucas would keep his promise. Dante would be found wounded in combat, receive a medal, perhaps a disability. Pension, the family would take care of him. The hospital's secret would remain buried. The money would continue to flow. An order that rotten, corrupt order that kept the city running would be restored. All it would cost was the life of a woman he had met less than 2 hours ago. He glanced to the side. Maya wasn't looking at him. She was checking the door locks with trembling obsession, her eyes scanning the darkness outside, searching for monsters. She was terrified, vulnerable, a civilian, thrown into the middle of a cartel war, but at the same time, she was there. She hadn't run away alone when he fell. She had pressed her hands to his wound. She smelled of rain and fear, but also of a stubborn courage he hadn't seen in years, not even in the mirrors of his own home. Dante's inner transformation had reached a tipping point. He stared at the silver badge pinned to his vest. All his life, that piece of metal had signified loyalty to the city, to his family name, to his father's legacy. But now, in the dim light of the dashboard, the badge looked like nothing more than a blood-stained piece of tin. A lawman's true journey wasn't about protecting order. It was about protecting the truth, even when that truth was inconvenient, dangerous, and lonely. The revelations of that night had stripped Dante of all his illusions. He realized that if he started that car and drove off alone, he wouldn't just be killing Maya. He would be killing the only part of himself still worth saving. The conflict was visceral. Blood versus badge, past versus future. The comfort of corruption versus the mortal risk of integrity. Dante closed his eyes for a second, absorbing the impact of that decision. He tasted the metallic taste of betrayal in his mouth, not his betrayal of Lucas, but Lucas's betrayal of everything they were supposed to stand for. When he opened his eyes again, the hesitation had vanished, replaced by a resolute coldness. He was no longer the older brother trying to keep the peace. He was the sheriff about to bring down his own blood. With a brusque movement that made him grunt in pain, Dante ripped the private radio from the dashboard, the direct line to his brother, and rolled down the window. The rain poured into the car, cold and violent. He looked at the device one last time, at the connection that represented his safety and his past, and hurled it forcefully into the darkness of the woods. The sound of the plastic breaking against a tree was swallowed by the storm, but to Dante, it sounded like the breaking of chains. Maya stopped fiddling with the door latch and looked at him, startled by the sudden gesture. She saw his stiff profile, his jaw clenched, and understood what had just happened behind the scenes of that tormented mind. He had cut the line. He had burned the bridge back home. "You could have left," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible over the sound of the rain. "You could have turned me in and ended it." Dante turned the key. In the ignition, the engine roared to life with a powerful rumble, vibrating through the chassis and rising up both their spines. He engaged the gear, but before accelerating, he turned to her. His eyes were dark, intense, devoid of any doubt. "I made a vow, Maya," he said, and for the first time that night, the word didn't ring empty. "Not to my brother, not to this cursed city. I swore to protect whoever needed protection. And if the price for keeping that vow is losing everything I have, then I'll pay it." He stepped on the gas, and the vehicle screeched its tires in the mud. Not toward the main road in safety, but turning sharply onto the steep and dangerous trail that led to the watchtower in the mountains. The decision was made. They were climbing to the highest and most isolated point, deliberately trapping themselves. There was no turning back. The hidden truth about Lucas's empire would be exposed, or they would die trying to convey it. As the car jolted uphill, Maya watched. Dante driving with one hand, the other pressed against his wound. The silence between them shifted again. It was no longer the silence of two frightened strangers. It was the complicit silence of two soldiers who had just declared war on the world. She felt a wave of emotion she couldn't name: gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, born from the certainty that this man had chosen to die by her side, rather than live without honor. The climb to the watchtower was mechanical and physical. Torture. The vehicle skidded in the mud. The engine protested against the incline, and with each jolt, Maya heard Dante hold his breath to avoid screaming. When they finally reached the summit, where the metal and wood structure stood like a solitary skeleton against the stormy sky, the car finally stalled. There was no time for relief. Dante opened the door, practically falling out, and Maya was there instantly, providing support. The wind up there was violent, howling through the trees as if nature itself were shouting a warning. They ran, or rather, staggered toward the tower entrance, Dante kicking the jammed door with a force that drained the last color from his face. As soon as they entered, and Dante braced the heavy door with his shoulder, and then with a rusty iron bar that was on the floor. The outside world was muffled. The interior of the tower smelled of mold, old dust, and abandonment. It was a small space, surrounded by glass windows on all sides, designed to observe forest fires, not to withstand a military siege. Dante slid down the wall to the floor, leaving a trail of dark blood on the peeling wood. The lantern he had brought illuminated the space erratically, creating long, distorted shadows that danced on the walls. "Maya," he called, his voice hoarse, struggling to stay focused as the blood loss began to take its toll. "I need you to listen to me now. There's no cavalry. There's no radio. Those men down there, they're not going to negotiate. They're going to come up that trail and burn this place down with us inside." The brutality of the statement made the air seem thin. Dante's transformation was complete. He was no longer the distant, unwavering authority. He was a wounded man, cornered, admitting his own mortality. Maya, who until then had operated in automatic survival mode, felt the impact of those words. She looked at him, at the red stain growing on his shirt, and understood that the dynamic had changed. He could no longer be the impenetrable shield. If they wanted to live, she would have to be the sword. What seemed simple begins to reveal layers that no one expected. Dante pulled a second weapon from his ankle, a smaller, backup revolver that he rarely used. With hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from hypovolemic shock, he extended the weapon to her. The metal was cold and heavy, a strange and terrifying object in the hands of a doctor who had sworn to save lives, not take them. "Have you ever fired a gun before?" he asked, his eyes fixed on hers, intense and demanding. "Never," Maya replied, her voice faltering. "I fix the damage they do. I don't cause it. Tonight, you'll have to do both," he said, gesturing for her to come closer. "Come here. Kneel down here." Maya obeyed, approaching him on the dirty ground. That night's journey had stripped them of any social formality. Dante took her hands and placed them on the weapon, his large, calloused fingers covering hers, adjusting the grip. The physical touch was electric. There was no gentle romance there, only the raw, desperate intimacy of war. He was passing on to her the responsibility of her own defense. He was teaching her to kill so that she would not die. "Hold on tight, but don't lock your elbows," he instructed, his warm breath brushing her face. "If they come through the door, you point to the center of the mass. Don't think, don't hesitate. If you hesitate, we die." As he explained the trigger mechanism and the safety lock, Maya felt a tectonic shift within her. The revelations about the city's corruption, the danger on the road, all of that seemed distant now. The only reality was the weight of the gun, the warmth of Dante's hands guiding hers, and the accelerated beating of his heart, which she could hear in the silence of the tower. The events of that night forged a bond that years of peaceful coexistence could never create. They were two makeshift soldiers in a trench in the sky, united by the deadly secret they carried and the hidden truth that Lucas wanted to bury. Suddenly, a beam of light swept through the tower's interior from below, briefly illuminating Dante's pale face and the fear in Maya's eyes. Beacons, they were rising. Dante reacted purely on instinct. With a grunt of pain, he lunged forward, wrapping his good arm around Maya's waist and violently pulling her to the ground, away from the glass windows that, in seconds, could shatter into deadly shards. The movement caused their bodies to collide, and they rolled into the shadows beneath the tower's parapet. "Stay down," he hissed, his face inches from hers, his body covering hers in instinctive protection. "They'll try to blind us with their headlights before they shoot." They're pressed against the cold ground, with Dante's weight on top of her, and the smell of blood and rain filling her senses. Maya realized that fear had transformed into something else. She looked at his profile, tense and focused, watching the darkness above her head. He was willing to take another bullet for her. He was willing to die in that forgotten tower so that her truth would survive. And in that makeshift trench, under the pressure of an army climbing the hill to kill them, Maya made her own decision. She gripped the handle of the revolver he had given her. She wasn't just going to hide. If they wanted to get to Dante, they would have to go through her. "They're stopping," Dante whispered, his trained ear picking up the change. In the sound of the engines outside, "They're on foot now." The silence that followed was the loudest Maya had ever heard. It was the sound of footsteps in the mud, the sound of weapons being unlocked in the darkness, the sound of destiny knocking at the door. But she was no longer alone. And, for the first time in his life, neither was Dante. The bond forged in that tower was indestructible, sealed not with promises, but with the mutual willingness to bleed for each other. "Write this down. This really affected me." The first shot didn't come from the men outside, but from the glass of the tower exploding inward, shattered by a rock thrown with brute force. It was the signal that diplomacy, if it ever existed, was over. The world turned to chaos in a fraction of a second. Dante didn't wait to see who would enter. He fired twice towards the opening of the door, the flash of the gun illuminating the interior of the tower like an artificial lightning bolt, revealing his face, contorted in a mask of pain and lethal determination. The invaders responded immediately. Bullets whizzed through the old wood, tearing splinters and creating a shower of sawdust and dust that mingled with the metallic smell of blood. Maya, pressed against the cold floor, felt the impact of each shot reverberate in her bones. She gripped the revolver Dante had given her with both hands, pointing it into the darkness, but her fingers were frozen. It wasn't cowardice. It was the paralysis of someone who had never witnessed the raw, naked violence behind the scenes of crime. Dante, however, moved with an unsettling economy of movement. Even wounded, he crawled into a vantage point, using an old metal box as a shield. He wasn't firing indiscriminately. He was counting, calculating, waiting. The door slammed shut with a violent kick. A dark silhouette burst into the cramped space, the rain rushing in with it. The intruder didn't see Dante in the shadows. He saw Maya, his weapon, an automatic rifle, swung toward her. Time seemed to slow down. That horrible temporal dilation that precedes death. Dante saw, and Dante recognized. The light from the fallen flashlight illuminated the intruder's face for a brief instant. It wasn't an unknown mercenary. It was Roberto, the man who had been Dante's best man, the man with whom he had shared a patrol car for 5 years, the man who had sworn to protect the city by his side. Dante's decision had to be quicker than thought. He couldn't hesitate. If he yelled, if he tried to argue, Maya would die. The transformation from brother-in-arms to mortal enemy happened in the time it took to pull the trigger. Dante fired. Not at the leg, not to wound, but at the shoulder, near the neck, a shot intended to neutralize the threat instantly. The bang was deafening within the glass walls. Roberto spun with the impact, the gun firing a useless burst against the ceiling before he fell backward, screaming, tumbling down the stairs in the rain and mud. "Back off," he hit Beato. A voice shouted from outside, thick with panic. Their certainty of impunity had been shattered. They thought they would be facing a dying man and a frightened doctor, not a sheriff willing to execute his own friends to save the witness. The footsteps receded. A car engine roared below, tires screeching in the mud as they dragged the wounded man away. They hadn't left because they'd lost the war, but because the battle had become too costly, too dirty. Silence. Return to the tower, but now it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a cemetery. From that moment on, everything begins to change silently. Dante dropped the gun, which hit the wooden floor with a dull thud. He didn't sigh with relief. He tilted his head back, closing his eyes, as fresh blood began to saturate the bandage Maya had applied, now mixed with new cuts from the shards of glass that flew during the shootout. The physical journey was over for now, but the emotional impact was only beginning. He had just shot a friend. He had crossed the finish line. Maya crawled toward him, ignoring the shards of glass that cut her knees. Her adrenaline was subsiding, giving way to an uncontrollable trembling, but her medic's hands took over. She touched Dante's face. His skin was cold and damp. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We did it, Dante. They're gone." Dante opened his eyes. They were cloudy, heavy, burdened with infinite sadness. He looked at Maya, not as the woman he had saved, but as the sole witness to his ruin. "They went to get reinforcements," he murmured, his voice faltering. "Or they waited for me to bleed to death. Roberto, I saw his eyes. Maya, he was going to kill you without blinking." Maya began examining his wounds. Besides the previous gunshot wound to the abdomen, he had a deep cut on his left forearm, caused by the window glass, which was bleeding profusely. She tore another piece of his clothing, acting quickly. The hidden truth was no longer abstract. It was written on his body. He was falling apart piece by piece to keep her whole. "Don't think about that now," she pleaded, tightening the makeshift tourniquet on his arm. Dante grunted, but didn't pull away. He let her care for him, surrendering to that care with a vulnerability none of his colleagues had ever seen. "You did what you had to do. You saved me. I killed my career. I killed my life here," he said, looking at the ceiling. "Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, I'm no longer the sheriff. I'll be hunted like a cop killer. They'll say I snapped, that I kidnapped you, that I shot Roberto for no reason. The narrative is already set, Maya." The relief of immediate survival was tainted by this grim revelation. They were alive, yes. Maya's heart was beating. Her lungs were drawing in the cold mountain air. But tomorrow seemed like an insurmountable abyss. Dante had bought her life with his own soul, traded his badge for the status of a fugitive. Maya paused, cleaning the blood for a second, and cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. In the dim light of the tower, with the rain lessening outside, a bubble of absolute intimacy formed. "Then we're going to fight the narrative too," she said, with a ferocity that surprised them both. "You're not alone in this, Dante. You chose my side when no one else did. Now I choose yours. If they come tomorrow, they'll have to take us. Both." Dante looked at her, and for the first time that infernal night, the ghost of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of joy, but of recognition. He saw in her the same moral fiber he thought he had lost. The external danger still lurked at the base of the tower, waiting in the shadows of the forest. Injustice still ruled the city below. But there, in that square meter of dirty wood and blood, there was an unbreakable bond. The relief was incomplete. Yes, the pain was real. The future was terrifying. But as he felt the warmth of her hands on his face, Dante knew one thing. It was worth it. He would pay the price 1,000 times that night, as long as she was there to see the dawn. The rain, which had battered the metal structure of the tower for hours, began to subside, turning into a fine, cold drizzle that heralded the arrival of dawn. But the darkness did not last. Suddenly, the forest surrounding the base of the tower was flooded by a pulsating flash, a blue and red strobe light that cut through the fog and reflected off the shards of glass scattered on the ground. These were not the predatory yellow headlights of Lucas's mercenaries. It was something official, something definitive. The sound of the state sirens, sharp and authoritative, rose up the hillside, silencing the crickets in the wind. From that moment on, everything begins to change silently. Dante, still leaning against the wall, feeling life slowly draining from the wound in his side, recognized the sound. He knew what it meant. The cavalry had arrived, but not to save him. In a city where the law had been privatized by crime, the arrival of outside reinforcements was a double-edged sword. They would see an armed sheriff, a deputy shot on the hillside, and a terrified civilian woman. The visual narrative was set against him. The hero of that night would be painted as the crazed villain of the following morning. "Did you call them?" Dante asked, without accusation, just with a weary observation. Maya, still holding the revolver with trembling hands, nodded. "When we went upstairs, the signal came back on my cell phone for a second. I dialed state emergency services. I said the sheriff was being attacked." Dante closed his eyes and let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. She had done the right thing. She had physically saved their lives, bringing a strength that Lucas couldn't openly confront. But in doing so, she had also sealed Dante's professional fate. He knew how the system worked. Lucas and his lawyers would already be twisting the story. Congressman Roberto would be the victim of an unstable superior. Dante would be the aggressor. "Listen, Maya," he said, opening his eyes and focusing on her with a final intensity. "Drop the gun, now. Throw it away. When they come in, you're the victim. I'm the kidnapper." "What?" "No," Maya protested, panic returning to her voice. "I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to say you saved me. They won't listen to you now. Not while I'm armed and bleeding, and a police officer is shot out there," Dante explained, his voice firm despite the pain. "If you side with me, they'll treat you as an accomplice, and I need you to be free. I need you to be alive and free to tell the truth later. That's the only way to win this war. Today's battle is over." The sound of heavy boots climbing the metal stairs of the tower echoed like thunder. Tactical voices shouted orders. "Police, hands on your head. Drop your weapon." Reality invaded their refuge. Dante, with a final effort, kicked the revolver away from himself, raising his bloodied hands above his head, exposing the stained badge on his chest. He wasn't surrendering to guilt. He was surrendering to strategy. The door was forced open. Beams of tactical light blinded them both. Men in gray uniforms, state police officers, stormed into the small space with guns drawn. Maya was pulled back by an officer, shouting that he was innocent, that he was the hero. But protocol is deaf. Two other officers advanced on Dante. There was no gentleness. They turned him onto his stomach, pressing his face against the dirty wood and shards of glass, ignoring the open wounds. The sound of the handcuffs closing on his wrists was the saddest sound Maya had ever heard. It was the sound of an honorable career being broken into. Dante didn't resist. He allowed them to handcuff him, allowed them to drag him out of the tower he had defended with his own blood. As they led him away, limping and bent with pain, he paused for a second at the destroyed door. The swirling blue lights illuminated the scene with a spectral coldness, revealing the devastation of that night. He turned his head and searched for Maya amidst the chaos. Their eyes met. There was no regret in Dante's eyes. There was a strange peace, the serenity of someone who knows he's paid the price. He lost his position as sheriff that night. He lost the trust of his peers, he lost his temporary freedom, and he lost the reputation he'd spent years building. To the outside world, he was a corrupt cop who'd snapped. But in that glance exchanged between the flashing lights and the rain that began to fall again, the hidden truth shone brighter than any lighthouse. Dante knew he would be arrested. He knew he would be judged. But he also knew that the woman looking at him now was alive only because he had the courage to destroy his own life to save her. Didn't fight for the law written in books. He fought for the law of blood and honor. And as they pushed him down the stairs toward the police cars, Maya understood the silent message he left behind. He would lose everything again, 1,000 times, just to keep her alive. His protection didn't end with the handcuffs. It became eternal the moment he accepted being the villain so that she could have a future. Sometimes, the true hero is not the one who receives the medal amidst the applause of the crowd, but the one who silently accepts the shackles so that another person may be free. This story of Dante and Maya reminds us that the strongest protection is not the one that avoids danger, but the one that faces total ruin just to keep a promise. That is precisely why Heart of Protection Stories exists, to give space to these narratives where courage comes at a high price and feeling is the only law that matters. If stories about choice, protection, and sacrifice resonate with you, subscribe to Heart of Protection Stories. It's a way of continuing to walk with me along these emotional paths, discovering what it truly means to care for someone. If this story made you feel something real, if you felt the weight of Dante's final decision, a like is a simple and silent way to show that you were here with them in that tower. And for those who understood that loyalty goes far beyond a badge, write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end." Protection comes in many forms, and not all of them end in farewell. There's a video over here that continues in that same vibe of absolute surrender and risk. Click on it and follow along with me there, because our emotional journey still has a long way to go.